Okay, well, thank you all for joining us. We truly appreciate you joining us. Once again, I'm Sarah Reyes. I'm the Managing Director of Communications for the California Endowment. Want to take care of a couple of housekeeping duties before we get started and turn it over to our presenters. First, if you have questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We will have a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. So please make sure if you have questions or comments to drop those into the chat box. We're also asking if you would just throw yourself a shout out or a shout out to everybody else who is joining us today in the chat box so that we know you can hear us and that things are moving forward. Today's webinar will be recorded and we will make sure that we provide a link out to everybody in case you have others in your organization or you know of others who would like to listen into the webinar regarding our transition beyond 2020. If you have any technical problems, please feel free to also drop those in the chat box. We have our strong group of techies on standby, listening and watching to make sure that everybody understands and can hear the presentation. And so with that, it is my pleasure to introduce to you my boss, and the person who leads us at the California Endowment, Dr. Robert K. Ross. Dr. Ross?
Thank you, Sarah. Good afternoon, everybody. Sarah, you've been terrific. I didn't think you actually had a boss, but I'll take it anyway. But welcome, everyone. Congratulations to our Lakers here in Los Angeles, and go Dodgers. Representing California, hopefully in a championship way. And we're going to talk about another kind of championship move by our state, and that is racial justice and equity for all. We won't rest at the California Endowment until we achieve that. I'm Dr. Bob Ross, President and CEO of the California Endowment, and joining me is the chair of our board of directors, Professor Dr. Sean Ginwright from San Francisco State University.
Thank you, Bob. It's great to be here this afternoon. Really excited to share with you all of the work and that has happened to move this forward to really serve all of the hard work in California. I am the chairman of the board for the California Endowment, and want to also introduce Bishop Minerva Carcano.
Hello, friends. I'm on.
Bishop, we can hear you.
You can hear me?
Yes.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm Minerva Carcano. I'm a bishop of the United Methodist Church. I'm assigned presently to serve the communities of Northern California and Northern Nevada. Previously, I was assigned to Southern California, Hawaii, Guam, and Saipan. It's a privilege to be on the board of the California Endowment and a privilege to serve as its vice chair. And it's my privilege to, on behalf of the board, thank all of you for showing us your support by being present today. We're here to launch TCE's next chapter, and it's so very important to us to have you journey with us.
Thank you so much, Bishop. So in my day job, I am an African-American studies professor at San Francisco State University. So it is an honor that I get to start this with a quote from Coretta Scott King that said, the greatness of a community is most accurately measured by the compassionate actions of its members. We've seen the greatness in your generosity in the communities we serve, and through the grassroots movements that we've been at the center of building healthy communities. Because of that work, we know that this work is people-centered and your action is paramount. And we know that in order to achieve racial justice in California and health equity in California, we must bridge the gap between us and the grassroots movements that are happening right now to create the profound and significant change that we need in our state, in our country, and in our communities. Your support has been instrumental, and there is more work ahead of us to bridge that gap.
For a moment, let's all pause to visualize a healthy California. When you hear the phrase, a healthy California for all people, what springs to mind? What does that look like to you? There are no wrong answers. We will give you a minute to think about it and then ask you to insert your thoughts and ideas into the Zoom chat function at the bottom of your screen. We'll give you a few minutes and then Sarah is going to just read comments out loud. When you think of a healthy California for all people, what springs to your mind?
Okay, so let's see if we can get some folks. I think they're typing in their information. Let's see, access to quality resources, a California where Black people thrive, smiling children, everyone thriving, housing, food, and education and security is resolved, all caps, empty prisons. Today, what comes to mind is voting rights, no prisons. So those are just some of the emphasis on prevention, especially early identification and intervention for children, clean air and water, breaking out of poverty, housing for all, no homelessness, equal education, access to affordable housing, parks, transit. So those are just some, Bishop. I will turn it back over to you.
What an enormous, beautiful, grand vision that is arising among all of us. At TCE, we've also been reflecting on what a healthy California for all people looks like and what we envision over the next 10 years and beyond. Here's where we landed.
Yeah, thank Bishop, and the comments coming in are just beautiful and affirming. Our board deliberated on our vision for future California, informed by grantee partners, grassroots leaders, young people, and their vision over our 10 years of building healthy California. And so the next few slides summarize that vision and what we gleaned and channeled from those community leaders. We envision a California where we have a robust intergenerational power building ecosystem for advancing health, justice, and racial equity. Next, we see a California where historically excluded people have voice, agency, and power in decision-making to close health equity gaps and eliminate structural racism. We also see a California where health destiny is not determined by a person's zip code, but by an intergenerational movement of people power, driving transformative changes in the pursuit of health and wellness for all. And finally, we envision a California where the most impacted communities are empowered to lead the nation as a beacon for wellness, equity, and for justice. Sean?
So this is our vision for the next 10 years. And this vision for health, justice, and racial equity for our most impacted communities is as ambitious as it is necessary. In order to bring this vision to life, we must acknowledge where we have been and reflect on our journey over the last 10 years. So where have we been? In 2010, we kicked off an initiative that we called Building Healthy Communities, or BHC for short, with community organizations and leaders at 14 sites statewide. Building Healthy Communities had a simple strategy, and that was to work on a local scale to create broad statewide impact. By funding advocacy and collaboration and community organizing, our goal was to reshape the places that shape us. This work exceeded every expectation, ultimately contributing to more than 1,200 policy wins, systems changes, and tangible benefits for our communities. Our commitment to places and partners over the last 10 years allowed us the time to develop deep relationships where partners can trust us and challenge us to be even better. Less tangible were the lessons we learned. And community leaders and organizations showed us the essential role of people power in making an impact on racial and health equity for the long term.
Stand by, Bishop. We have you on. There you go, Bishop.
Thank you. Thanks for all the help. Over the last decade, our communities were not quiet. They showed us what it means to speak up and make their voice heard for the issues that impact them, their families, and their community. They organized, they protested, they turned out with signs and megaphones and t-shirts, and they had things to say. For example, when the residents spoke out in West Fresno about city leaders leaving them behind, let me tell you, their voices were heard. Just last week, they broke ground on a new community college campus. And now the state of California is investing tens of millions of dollars in their community to improve life and health expectancy. Every opportunity to hear these community leaders speak on the health and racial inequities shouldered by our communities was moving. It was inspiring. And the reason we are here today to invest in even more of that critical grassroots work.
And not only did they make their voices heard, but they did it in a unified and beautiful way. We watched intergenerational change makers and young people and adults coming together to mobilize for the same cause. This sense of togetherness and unity made the movement stronger and even more powerful. There were so many stories we can recall, such as the street vendor work in Boyle Heights and the moms in City Heights who came together to get halal meals into the school lunch program. The young people leading the way for the community in Fresno to take on the issue of needing more green space in their parks for work. And as we said, there's so many more stories and so many more successes.
Well, we also know this work is tough and taxing, and perhaps no more taxing and difficult a year in 2020 than any of the last 50 years that we've had in this nation. So it requires an inherent resilience and an ability to find joy, even some of the most difficult and demanding moments. Because of this, finding reasons to celebrate both the everyday moments, the small steps of healing pain and injustice and inequity, and the large victories involving the challenging of the structures of our system, it's imperative. That work continues to be imperative. We all remember early on the violent police shootings in Salinas and how the community came together, stood together in a loud voice against this issue, and now the healing and centering work on racial equity in Salinas and Monterey County is moving forward. They're moving ahead with some beautiful, beautiful racial equity work in governance, and we're understanding that there's still a lot of work to do, particularly this year, but it was because of the leadership of our Green Tea partners that has raised the critical issues of equity and moving them forward. You heard us mention wins across the last 10 years of VHC. There's no more way to celebrate these 1,000 wins, no better way to celebrate these 1,000 wins, just to take a pause and pay tribute to the community and grassroots leaders that have led to these wins. Those initiatives have resulted in improving environments for better school health, neighborhood and prevention services, improving health equity in our communities. And these policy changes reflect accomplishments championed by Building Healthy Communities partners and participants. But our money was not alone in this effort. We have a lot of partnerships with community foundations, with other funders across the state, in these regions and in the healthy community sites. So we're not taking credit for all of this work. We want to thank and acknowledge you as our partners in co-funding many of these wins and system changes that were championed by community leaders. Next, we have the wins broken down into campaigns. 3 key campaigns over those 10 years in building healthy communities. One, of course, in the neighborhood level, inclusive community development, 552 wins there, 343 wins in schools, and 125 wins for prevention services and public health across our 14 building healthy community sites. Bishop?
Amidst all of that, we were and are committed to learning from these community leaders and organizations. The following key issues were shaped by them. As we pivot into the next decade and beyond, these will shape how we reach our shared vision of health equity and racial justice across the whole state of California.
Sean, you're on mute.
Sean, I'm sorry, you're on mute.
All right, all right. So let's talk about the impact. The power of youth and adults organizing to create significant changes in their communities and in Sacramento. The power of youth, regardless of the issue we face, whether it's Black Lives Matter, immigration rights, or environmental justice, we continue to center the intergenerational voices of community members to reimagine and reshape systems at the local and statewide level. Power is both a tool for change and a source for transformation for those who wield it. Our communities not only have the power, but they are the power. They've shown up and shown us how to mobilize change and systems and transform communities from the ground up. And we learned that finding their voice, telling their story, and speaking truth to power is healing for people who have faced lifetimes of marginalization. So we must be intentional about investing in the full power. And so of the full power of our ecosystem, we've learned that at its core, the power ecosystem must be centered around and working in support of movement building led by grassroots organizations and community leaders. The people who have been most negatively impacted by the systems are seeking change. They must also encompass diverse sets of skills and expertise to truly be effective in driving this systemic change.
We also know that there is no health justice without racial justice. A primary root cause underlying health equity in California is racism and a system of white supremacy that continues to structure benefits and opportunity to people based on the color of their skin. We cannot reimagine a healthier California without deliberately challenging this country's legacy of racial hierarchies and unearthing the systemic racism that shapes our lives. We must look beyond policy wins to transforming whole systems to be more racially just. Policy wins are important, but we cannot stop there. We must go the extra step to shape the racist foundation that reshape the racist foundation that underlies the systems we are organizing and advocating to change. We also need to create a more integrated organizational approach to maximize impact. Lastly, we realize that the California Endowment must reevaluate its organizational structure and its approach to offer more integrated support across local, regional, and statewide work.
Hold on, Dr. Ross, you're on mute. There
Thanks.
you are.
Thank you, Bishop. We've come to refer to our power building work with this very simple formula: A plus B equals C. And if we could summarize 10 years of grant making, literally 1,000 grants, probably $1.5 billion in grant dollars and resources invested. And this is the punchline of what we learned for that 10 years of building healthy communities. A stands for agency, B stands for belonging, and C stands for change. Agency is the equivalent of understanding your own power and finding your own voice, both at the individual level and collectively at the community level. Belonging represents that inclusive spirit of our beloved community: coalition development, alliance building, healing circles, and anything else to instill a sense of togetherness and oneness as a community. And change is the result, like expanded Medi-Cal for undocumented young people, policy wins to reduce school suspensions and impacting Black and brown young people, urging and compelling local elected officials to invest more dollars in parks and soccer fields, or closing youth detention facilities in favor of community-based programs. And so that's what A plus B plus C, A plus B equals C has meant to us over the last 10 years. And we're going to be applying that lesson of A plus B and C in triplicate going forward. Bishop?
From the lessons that Dr. Ross has just outlined, we find ourselves now at a very transformational moment. In the wake of COVID-19 and its disproportionate impact on Black, Indigenous, and people of color in general, the systemic racism many of us experience every day has surfaced prominently. From state-sanctioned police brutality resulting in widespread protest to the devastating effects of perpetual climate injustice. These crises illuminate what we have long known to be true. Systemic racism permeates the lives we live and the very air that we breathe. It underlies every aspect of our quality of life, from our jobs, our neighborhoods, our schools, our interactions with one another, to our disproportionate health risk and our lack of accessible care.
Yet, even when these systems fail, grassroots leaders show up with bravery, resilience, and determination. One example of that is in South Kern, Janelle Gore, who recently produced a video about a love letter to her son and the hope she has as an African-American woman for her future children, and that all that is going on with this young leader still has hope in the face of a time that has been hard and is lifted up with anti-Black racism. And when a call for protection during this pandemic, many of you stepped up and have been disturbingly needed PPE to essential workers throughout the state. As you took this to the streets, you cared for each other, protected each other, and made sure the message was never lost that Black lives matter. We refuse to believe that this is the way things will always be. We know there is a future where every person in California has voice, power, and agency in creating systems and structures that work for all people. So we know that building power must be centered on the human beings and the communities who have been most negatively impacted by the systems we seek to change. Philanthropy has come far in addressing many of these challenges and working toward these necessary changes. Now, we have even greater role to play in bridging the gap between philanthropy and the grassroots movements, organizing people power on the ground.
Friends, we know that the following framework and goals are very ambitious. We also know that if there was ever a time for ambition, now is that time. We are compelled to articulate a desired future that motivates us to reach beyond what may seem feasible from where we are at this moment. But we are compelled. We are compelled because we have a profound belief in the power of today's movements for racial economic, and social justice to reimagine what is possible and translate that vision into strategies for transformation.
So, of course, one obvious question is, what's different from the last 10 years of work? Where are the points of emphasis for the next decade of work coming ahead? And we have, the next slides are about the how, the what, and the where of our evolutions from the Building Healthy Communities work. Our how, we affirm a belief that we'll get to health and racial equity in California by supporting a new power building ecosystem. You've heard that phrase at least 10 times by now. That's not a mistake, that's by design. Supporting a power building ecosystem that is centered around organizing and base building, led by people who have been most negatively impacted by the systems we are seeking to change. We are committed to moving beyond the idea of policy wins to profoundly addressing structural racism by seeking to transform systems to be racially just. And to Sean for the where.
So the where, our where, we're deepening our commitment to supporting an integrated power building ecosystem. There is that term again in California. We seek this work radiating out from our BHC sites to places within 4 regions.
And we envision that in the next short 10 years, that by 2030, California has a robust intergenerational power building ecosystem for advancing health, justice, and racial equity. We will develop this power system in 4 key ways: by expanding community-led advancement of system changes, by supporting community organizing as a central approach, by growing an intergenerational, intersectional movement that supports not only leadership, but healing, and by expanding capacity to create new enduring narratives, reflecting the experiences of those who are most impacted by injustice.
To achieve this long-term goal, we must intentionally build a broader ecosystem of organizations with diverse capacities and capabilities, skills, and expertise, and with the reach to local, regional, and state levels. Such a power building ecosystem centers organizing and base building, which you can see here, what we call the Power Flower. Thank you for Jennifer Ito at USC, their Center on Equity. But it's a recognition that organizations with other strategies for building and using power are also central to an effective statewide power building infrastructure. We are now transitioning to a series of slides unpacking the what, which is the change we are seeking in 4 key systems. Each slide shows a goal for that system. The first is health. Poor health outcomes result from a continuing legacy of policies and practices that discriminate, segregate, and exclude people from the resources and opportunities to be healthy. The system is fragmented and uncoordinated. It lacks a holistic approach connecting healthcare with public health and prevention, and has little accountability to patients or communities. So therefore, you see a stated goal for a transformed health system where all Californians reside in communities with access to equity-focused health systems.
The second system we're targeting is schools. Rather than serving as a driver for equitable outcomes, California's public school system has consistently fallen short of its potential to create a more level playing field. The school system's failure to recognize its roots in white supremacy culture and complicity in reproducing harm in communities of color has led to persistently inequitable outcomes over generations. So can you see our goal? Can you join us in the goal of transformed school system, a transformed school system where every public school student in California, regardless of their race, their income, their identity, or their neighborhood, will be educated in a racially equitable, inclusive, healing-centered learning environment.
So our third system is the justice system. A growing body of research has proven that contact with the justice system has a negative deleterious impact on the social determinants of health in individuals, families, and communities. Deeply entrenched structural racism has facilitated the disproportionate representation of people of color in the system and consequently their experience of harm from it. You see stated here our goal that California will realize progress in divesting from incarceration and immigration enforcement and investing in health and well-being. As we move towards this goal by focusing on repairing the racialized harm caused by this system, reinvesting in health and well-being, and supporting redefined approaches to healing, safety, and justice.
And finally, the vast array of systems that influence and shape community development. We know that the control of land, natural resources, labor, and capital intersect in place. We know that their misuse has resulted in gentrification, displacement, overinvestment and disinvestment, environmental degradation, undesirable land use, and increased health inequities across California. The growing conflict between the role of capital and its impact on the health of communities is rooted in the original atrocities of this nation, slavery and genocide, and committed in the name of economic advancement. So therefore, you see our goal for this development is one that democratizes community and economic development. To make progress towards systemic transformation that gets at the roots of this over the next decade, we must strengthen the capacity of community leaders and movements to advance community-controlled development and ownership of affordable and clean housing, land, air, and water. Bishop.
The final evolution of our work comes from our learnings about the importance of place. Where we will do our work is critical. We know that power building, particularly among communities in California that have been most harmed by structural racism, is a dynamic and ever-evolving movement, and we must evolve with it. Over the last decade, we have learned much about the tremendous power of being deeply committed to specific places, 14 of them to be exact. We also recognize that shifting demographics, compelling needs, and dynamic opportunities have arisen beyond building healthy communities sites in other communities throughout California. Our commitment to power building, particularly among the communities facing high levels of inequality and resultant poor health outcomes, requires us to be responsive and nimble. With this flexibility, we can adapt to changing movements, environments, policies, and needs to increase impact statewide. We are committed now to building a bigger we from the foundation we've laid over the past decade. Over the next 10 years, we will grow from the original 14 building healthy communities sites to places within 4 broader regions where health and racial inequities are most acute and where power building opportunities exist. We will work to align local, regional, and statewide grant making in order to provide ongoing and consistent support to an ecosystem of partners who are reshaping the power terrain in California. This geographic expansion answers the call of our partners and the communities we've walked alongside with over the last 10 years to be both rooted in local partnerships and responsive to new opportunities for growing the movement for health and justice for all.
Now that we know where the next decade will lead us, let's talk about the next 6 months as we prepare to launch this effort. In order to move forward with people power at the helm, in the spring of 2021, we will invite our grantees and community leaders to share their collective knowledge and ideas with us through a community engagement process. This input will allow us to refine the thinking we have put forward here, shape our understanding of new places of our work, and inform the strategies that will move us forward.
Meanwhile, here at the California Endowment, we'll be committed to creating an internal structure that facilitates our alignment and support of our grantees and our partners. We are in the process of completing an operational restructuring that will allow us to be more integrated across our local, regional, and statewide work, and to strengthen our own racial equity practice. The following very busy slide is a high-level overview of what our operational restructuring will look like. But the bottom line is that we'll be integrating in a matrix kind of format regions and regional work with issues and issue work, so that each region and each regional team will have a set of core issues working with those community leaders on, as well as looking for statewide opportunities to integrate for statewide change. Stay tuned for the official launch of this work in spring of 2021. It'll be here before we know it. But just consider it, California Endowment, for the next few weeks having a yellow construction tape around the foundation. As we settle into new chairs and new roles and operationalize the kind of integrated approach that many of you and our grantee partners have been calling for from the California Endowment for some time. Bishop.
We believe that ultimately no force is as strong as the power of people united to their vision for change. So we thank you, friends, for joining us on this journey thus far. With your partnership, we can transform systems. Together, we can lift all voices and create a California where justice and health go hand in hand, no matter who we are or where we live.
So will you join us to lead the philanthropic sector in funding organizing, advocacy, and movement building over the next decade? Will you join us? Please use your chat function I think it's on the bottom of your screen. Just use your chat function to let us know if you'll join us. And thank you again for being here. We want to spend the remainder of our time together answering any questions you might have. Again, we want to ask you to use your chat function for questions. We have a team of folks that are standing by to respond to any of the questions, comments, or concerns you might have. So just again, thank you for being here, and we look forward to responding to your questions.
So thank you.
And we have, I just want to let our colleagues know, Sarah, that we have our two senior vice presidents, Dr. Tony Eiton and Marion Standish, on standby and willing to join us to help in answering any questions. If you want to give me good news, you can direct that question to me. If you have any criticism, direct it to Tony and Marion.
So thank you, Dr. Ross. I do want to, again, welcome in Marion Standish, who's our senior VP, as well as Dr. Tony Eiton, who is also a senior VP at the California Endowment. And they're here to answer the easy questions, right? We do have some questions, but I do want to just let you know, when Sean asked, will you join us? And will you join us on this effort? What we saw in the chat box is yes, let's do it. Let's go. We're ready to move forward. So that is just really exciting to see the enthusiasm. So here is the first question. And the question is, Sometimes we see such bravery and courage and risk-taking action from the most grassroots initiatives, those without a lot of formal structures in place, those that may not find it easy to apply for a grant, and those that want to spend their time working for change rather than writing a proposal. How will you fund these types of organizations? I'm gonna ask Tony Eiton, who was responsible for our Building Healthy Communities and has seen that play out. And then if Marion or Dr. Ross want to jump in after him, you're welcome to. Tony.
Thanks, Sarah. Hi, everybody. Great not to see you. Actually, that's not true. It would be really nice to see you, but great to know that you're out there in cyberspace. So this basic question has been kind of at the heart of our deliberations over the past several years. The beauty of building healthy communities was that we had these structures in all the 14 sites and elsewhere that we called hubs, but they were basically a mechanism to essentially organize local activities, as well as onboard some of the types of organizations that were described in the question. Newer organizations that were just coming together that didn't have necessarily the capacity or the history or the infrastructure to get a grant from the government or from a foundation. They were able to get support from the hub, and the hub could kind of serve as a, quote unquote intermediary, to bring them on board. And we had a number of newly formed organizations. I think of Steve Eldred and City Heights and our partners down there who brought on new organizations, African immigrant organizations that didn't have really any infrastructure at all, but were able through small grants to build up their infrastructure, to leverage relationships with the hub and with other organizations to do incredible work in City Heights. And we had that throughout building healthy communities. So we understand the power of grassroots organizations and just the raw energy of leaders that recognize a problem and want to work on it. So we're trying to design our work going forward with the knowledge and experience of having worked with grassroots organizations through building healthy communities. And that's going to be our fundamental mantra, is to identify those emerging organizations and leadership that can contribute to a larger network of statewide work. I'll tell you, just in the past few months, leaders within the endowment, particularly on Black-led organizing, have made this a fundamental principle of how we will reach out to build the capacity of Black-led organizing across the state. And they've been a little bit reluctant to just sort of push the money into the usual direction. They've been trying to find ways to reach deeper into community, to identify those newly emerging organizations and leaders, and to fund them, to create the capacity for them to participate in larger regional and statewide efforts. So I think the question for us is, how will we continue to do that? And the question for you as our partners, both funding partners and grantee partners, is to continue to hold us accountable to live up to that standard of practice.
Marion, any comments?
No, I think that Tony really covered it. With respect to the Black-led funding, I think one of the really remarkable things that has come out of this difficult time we've been in with COVID and everything else has been the energy of lifting up so many of our actors and leaders and small organizations that really are a part of the movement, and we have seen them partner with larger organizations that stepped up to give them support and to help leverage our resources so that they really do reach the smallest organizations. And hopefully that kind of energy, that sort of commitment and coalition building and alliance building will come forward and continue into the future.
we have other questions. I do want to say the great thing about doing webinars like this, some of our other partners are on, and Jennifer Ito from USC Peer is on, and just mentioned that USC Peer is now USC Equity Research Institute. Noted, Jennifer, we will change the slide. So thank you for your continued work. Next question, do you see the change or end goal, including increased power of communities in and of itself? If so, how have you considered capturing this, because it is less tangible than policy wins? Dr. Ross, would you like to weigh in or want to transfer it over to Marion or Tony?
Yeah, I'll start off and see if Tony may have a point of view on this as well. Yeah, we've what we learned through BHC in the last 10 years is that power building is both a how and a what. It's a strategy and it's an outcome. And so one of the things that, I mean, certainly the policy wins are a relatively accessible way to capture a what. But the questioner is absolutely right. How do you assess the effectiveness of power building in and of itself? And so our Chief Learning Officer, Han Kao Yu, Dr. Han Kao Yu, is helping us get sharper and better about that. But you know, measuring the number of leaders in a youth engagement pipeline, measuring the capacities of power building organizations to drive change, measuring new and more effective coalitions and alliance building. These are very important things to measure, even though they're not particularly easy to measure. But this is, we landed as a board very comfortably in a place of power building being a critical end, but also a very important means. But Tony, anything else on that?
It's a great question, and you know, Dr. Ross's answer it basically outlines how we've approached it. I had the privilege of having a briefing from one of our learning and evaluation consultants yesterday on this issue, where you know we were diving into what does it mean to essentially measure power, and they're looking at some things like measuring kind of voting patterns, voter registration, actual, voting. But that's only one measure. And of course, because so many of our communities are categorically prohibited from participating at the ballot box, both for immigration reasons and formerly incarcerated populations, et cetera, that can't be the only measure that we use. We do know, as Dr. Ross said, that power is both a means and an end. And, for us, when you're talking about power as an end, you're talking essentially about building the muscle of communities to shape an agenda that delivers equity. And so if you can't measure the muscle, you can measure the impacts of that muscle in terms of the policies, as Dr. Ross said, the narrative, the story that we tell ourselves about what matters and what makes health. And then looking at whose voices are being included in decision-making at the local, the regional, and the statewide level. These are the things you have to measure to see if the muscle that you have built is actually having the outcomes that you hope that it will have. So that's, it's an ongoing conversation for us. How do you measure this? It's an ongoing conversation across the field. Many of our philanthropic partners are looking at this question too. It can't just be voting and political measures. We also have to look at civic measures to get a sense of how communities are becoming stronger. We will continue to look at these issues and use as many accessible measures as we can.
Sarah, I wanted to just respond to that really
in.
excellent question as well, particularly as it relates to youth. And I know that Han is really trying to sort of figure out how the endowment can really think about this, but also particularly with young people, thinking about this sense of agency, the idea that that young people have a vision of the communities they want to create, and so this sense of agency is really important, particularly for young people who are disenchanted by don't have faith in the systems that have been set up. They don't believe in voting. And so this sense of agency, which is a way to say that, hey, actually, I can actually have an impact, is another way that we're sort of thinking about sort of the impact of this work, particularly for young people in our communities.
Great, thank you. Next question. How will organizing and base building organizations at the center of the Power Flower help inform TCE support of the other petals? Who would like to jump in and answer that one? Tony, Mary, go ahead, Tony.
All right, so I don't know if these are ringer questions, but somebody out there knows all the hard ones.
There are no ringer questions here.
Okay, but well asked, questioner. So this is again one of those core kind of issues for us. It's and let me just start with a simple way of addressing it. We have adopted what we call a power first approach to spreading from our BHC communities out into the larger region. In other words, our plan is to identify other power players in those regions and understand what they're working on, how they're networked together across the region, what infrastructure they leverage, what capacities they have, what gaps there are in power across the region. And our goal is to first try to understand that infrastructure as well as we can, which is why we depend on experts like Jennifer Ito and Manuel Pastor to help us identify that. We're working with Pivot California, which is a group of funders and power builders that are looking at this question of power building infrastructure across the state and how we can work together to shore up that infrastructure and build it out. So our first and primary focus is on the power building infrastructure and how those power building groups and organizations are working in the region and then subsequently across the larger state. And our goal is to use that as a springboard to the kinds of investments that we'll be making across the region and across the state. So if they're pointing to other petals on that power flower as a weakness or a need or a capacity that they'd like to develop, then that's where our funding is going to go. We're going to follow the lead of our power building partners. And we recognize that those other petals are really most effective when they're in service of base building organizations. So that's when we have a judgment to make, which direction we'll go, we will lean towards the guidance of our power building partners to allow them to help us build the capacity of the rest of the petals of that flower.
Right. We do have a question around the regions. The question is, I'm still a bit fuzzy on the where. I believe I heard 4 regions mentioned, but now I'm not sure what regions are or are not included in this plan. Sorry if I missed that slide. Are the 4 regions meant to cover the entire state or more specific areas? Dr. Ross, do you want to jump in and then possibly Marion go from there?
Maybe put up the map slide if we can, Sarah.
Yes.
Yep.
We'll have them put up the map slide.
Marion, I'm going to kick it to you and Tony.
So while we're waiting to look at the map slide, we really have a couple of themes in mind as we grow our work from our 14 sites that we've been working in over the last 10 years. And keep in mind, we've been working both deeply in 14 sites and at the statewide level as well, since we have many statewide partners that are focused more on issues that touch everyone. Our approach is to build out from those 14 sites where, as we say in the boardroom, we're not leaving any power on the table. We're going to work out from them and we're going to take the lead, I think, as Tony was saying a moment ago, from our power building partners as to where is the opportunity in these regions? Where can we begin to engage community, engage new voices, engage new activity across our systems? in these 4 regions. So we haven't really offered yet so much precision. We're not going to work in any specific county per se, but we are going to work in these regions and follow the lead of our power building partners to really build our muscle from our 14 sites.
Yeah, and if I could add, I mean, what Miriam's describing is a desire to not foreclose opportunities. We really do want to work with our funding partners. Many of them have expertise and experience and relationships in certain regions. We are a statewide foundation. Our goal is to improve the health status of all Californians. And we think we can do that best by working in close partnership with other funding partners and understanding what their interests are so that we can leverage their efforts as well. One of the challenges of defining very discrete areas is that you actually end up shutting out some opportunities that we can't predict at this time as we go forward. So we really would like to keep as open a playbook as possible for opportunities. Again, following the lead of our power building partners, our goal is to find opportunity that we can leverage in concert with partners and not necessarily circumscribe where it is we'll go and when we'll go in the particular place. I know that might seem...
The only thing I would add to that is for our funding partners, a couple of things. One is it's a high level framework more than it is a detailed strategic plan. That's not laziness, that's by design. We learned from our first 10 years of building healthy communities. When we started building healthy communities, we went overboard and as Tony likes to say, we overcooked the dish. We came in with a fairly rigid and well-defined strategic outcomes and a logic model. And we got pushback from our community partners and community leaders that if we really saw those community leaders as partners, we can't come in with an overcooked strategic plan. So the vision hopefully is clear. The theory of change, which is about power building, is clear and unapologetic and robust. So we're stubborn and pretty clear about the vision and fairly adaptive about the strategies to get there. And that's really by design, not only for our grantee partners, but with many of you as funding partners. We're not naming this BHC 2.0. We haven't given it a name because we know in philanthropy, once you name something, you kind of own it. And we really want the vision to be co-owned and co-shared by our grantee partners and so many of you that are doing this work right now. So right now, the plan is called Beyond 2020. and if our community leaders and young people want to give it a name, they can give it a name. But it's really by intent to be better strategic partners with our grassroots leaders and also better funding partners and co-investors with many of you.
Sarah, can I just make one point that sort of states...
Really quick, because we're at the top of the hour and I promised everybody we would go, so really quick.
Well, yeah, just in case folks are new to this map, not everyone's from California, the white circles on this map represent our 14 sites. So that's where we currently have been invested at that deep place level. And the colorful blocks are Northern California, which takes us up to the border, including the Bay Area, Central California, which includes the Central Coast, Los Angeles, and Southern California, which includes San Diego and Imperial County. So just to be clear on what this is, because it is definitely not entirely clear to everybody, I'm sure. So thanks for that extra minute.
Let me just say one other quick thing, Sarah, sorry.
Okay.
Those white spots, those 14 white spots in the abstract map, those 14 white spots sit in counties that represent 70% of California's population. So building healthy communities was working primarily at the county level in jurisdictions that affected, over 2/3 of the state's population. So our goal is to spread to cover more of the state's population, but we're starting from a footprint of 70% of the state's population. So just to give people some context here, it looks like little sprinkles of dots. That's a lot of California right there.
Dr. Ross, any final say?
Just thank you. You know, this nation is at a critical moment, pivotal moment. We believe in California. We believe California has both the obligation and the opportunity to show the nation what a beloved community looks like, a state of belonging. And so we know we'll all be waiting on pins and needles about the outcome of this election. But no matter what happens on election day this year, we have to invest in the capacity and ability of people most impacted by these systems to shape structural change and through a racial justice lens. And so that's what the work is going to be about. We'll be about it unapologetically. Happy and thrilled to work with any one of you, all of you, in assuring doing what we can to assure this vision for the state of California. So thank you guys. Thank you, Sarah.
Sean?
Thank you,
any
Bishop and
final
Sean.
comments? No, Bishop? Okay, we want to thank everybody for joining us today. There were some questions that were not answered. We will keep those and make sure that we get back to you. We also want to let you know that we will be sending you a follow-up email if you registered for this, that we will provide the slides as well as a web-based tool that is connected to our website that will also help you understand this new work that we're going to be doing in California, and not really new, continued, expanded work in California. We appreciate you attending today, and thank you so much for being with us. Have a good day.